About a month ago, I watched Kakegurui for the first time, under the immense pressure of constant recommendations that were coming my way. It's a wonder I'd been able to avoid it for so long, with it being one of the more popular shows that's emerged in the past couple of years. However, as much as I hate to admit it, being the pinnacle of anime opinions and taste, as we all see ourselves as being, those who recommended it to me ended up having the last laugh. This video is primarily for the people like me who are holding out on the show, and to maybe convince you of why you should consider watching Kakegurui.
1, 2, 1.
Kakegurui is one of those anime that can cause a long and probably heated discussion whenever you dare to even mouth its name. Some people love it to the point of obsession, some people despise it, and some just casually experience it and move on with their lives. But what is it with all of these extreme reactions? Well, I'll hope to cover a few bases and help you decide whether to take the plunge for yourself, and for those among us who have already watched it, maybe reinforce your opinions on the show, positive or negative. Kakegurui, for myself personally, is a guilty pleasure anime that I initially had no idea why I was fond of it. Guilty pleasure anime are a pretty common thing for me. Kakegurui joins the ranks of shows that are a little controversial to like, but I enjoyed my time with. Rent a Girlfriend, SAO, and Cosmic Illion. Wait, no officer, I meant the movie, Oh Thunder Snow, with Shiro in it, I'm not a lolicon! Is that Drake Bell? Kakegurui is very polarising to say the least. Even here on YouTube you can find a lot of opinions, and as aforementioned, some of them will be a little extreme. It's created binary opposition. You either like Kakegurui, or you don't. There's no simply just enjoying it. It is absolutely no doubt the impact it has had though. It's gained a huge following, and I'd say is becoming one of the bigger gateway anime that we've seen of recent times. I find that rather strange. In the past, popular gateway anime have typically been long-running shonen series that have a lot of appeal. Even in recent times with shows like Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia, and most recently Jujutsu Kaisen, they have all focused on that typical action. My gateway, however, was Full Metal Panic, so perhaps I should be a little less surprised at more unconventional shows gaining this status. Kakegurui doesn't strike me as a show that would appeal to the audience that it has, but anime is quite usually surprising, and as it grows more into the mainstream, more people will be undoubtedly introduced through this show. This is where my reluctance actually ended up stemming from. I saw myself as way out of the demographic for the show, and there were other factors that I'm going to cover that made neat little excuses when I received the 500th message telling me to just get on with it. Firstly, the fans. God, what an absolutely awful topic to bring up for any anime of this size. Now, it is very important to note that I am not generalising by any means, but by God, with a tide of new fans also comes quite a lot of bad eggs. I'd say over time though this has become much less of an issue, and like a lot of popular shows at the moment, you just kind of have to separate it from the show itself and just kind of enjoy what you enjoy. I'd honestly say though over time this has actually gotten much better than I expected. Coincidentally enough, I actually run an Instagram account based around my favourite character from the show, Mary, and a lot of the people I've interacted with over there are surprisingly super chill people, so if you like her character like I did and just want to support me, you should consider following me at Mary_Chan on Instagram. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the video. There were other reasons that were a little more glaring to me, however, the main one actually being the art. If I could take back every single negative thing that I'd actually said about the art before I watched it, I'd probably do so in a heartbeat. Now, in the clips that I've actually put on screen, you can likely see what I'm on about. It looks really unappealing and makes the characters look downright horrifying in some circumstances. However, this is actually by design, and a very purposeful inclusion that's true to the source material in the manga. It put me off at first, but the further that I actually went in, I respected it a lot more due to it being very thematic. The downright terrifying and repulsive frames are actually a deliberate showing of just how bonkers the characters actually are. It directly contrasts with the whole, and for lack of a better term, fan service. Unlike other anime with this aspect, it presents you the cute girls, before immediately contrasting it with horrible visuals, to show how crazy the gambling and the gamblers actually are. It's a unique take on it, I'll give it that, but it still doesn't make saying Yumiko Jamami Kakegurui no Show any less weird, and somewhat repetitive as time goes on. However, I actually really enjoyed the animation by Mappa here, and if you recognise the name, especially as of late with their growing prevalence with Jujutsu Kaisen, Attack on Titan and Chainsaw Man, just to name a few, you know that they have decently high production value. Another common gripe that didn't bother me too much that I've seen is the exclusivity to Netflix, a thing people typically call Netflix jail. Now, it doesn't really matter to me too much because it's a rather common subscription service to actually have, and it does have an actual budget unlike other shows stuck there as well. And even if I didn't have it, there is always the option of sailing the Grand Line with Luffy to kind of watch it elsewhere. Of course though, that is only something to keep in mind if you're actually reluctant about it. Now, those are kind of the most common criticisms that I've seen of the show, but I'll go quickly over some of the other aspects to quell any lingering worries that you might have. The characters and story itself are relatively simple. We follow a whole cast of characters attempting to thrive in their school tenure at Hyako Private Academy, a school where your very worth is determined by gambling. This ends up forming a caste system where students who are in debt become quote-unquote house pets. Of course, there's more depth and mystery to it all, but that's about it. The stakes are always uber high, and the rules deadly and tense. Our cast of characters certainly aren't groundbreaking, the most prominent one being the one you see absolutely everywhere, whether it's her as a cat, her as a disturbing monster, or her on every single post about the show. Yumiko Jabami receives a lot of the spotlight when it comes to Kakegurui, being pretty much the definitive heroine. Ryota Suzui ends up being our pseudo-protagonist, if you will, initially assuming the mantle of main character and the introduction to the world. There are a lot of other characters that make up the whole cast too, with constant mini-antagonists leading up to the quote-unquote big bad at the end, giving the show a gamble of the week formula almost. In terms of how it actually serves as an adaptation from its source material, it's rather faithful, although it does cut content, but that isn't really a prominent gripe considering the amount of episodes it actually has. The manga also has a spin-off focusing on my favourite underdog character of the show, Mary Saotome, called Kakegurui Twin. This is something I can personally actually recommend to you if you enjoy the show and her character, as I can definitively say that I enjoy that manga not even as a guilty pleasure, but because it's genuinely just really good. The music of the show is actually provided and composed by Techno Boys Paulcraft Green Fund, which was such a mouthful to say it took me about 4 takes to get perfectly. Having not seen much of their work is a complete shame, because some of it is criminally good, and Kakegurui is no exception. At its worst, it's serviceable, and at its best, it's absolutely phenomenal. There was one particular song that never failed to hype me up during an intense gambling scene: Strange Visage. Coincidentally enough, they actually also provided the composition for the latest season of Prisma Ilia and its accompanying movie, Oath Under Snow. Their remix of the main character's theme was absolutely incredible, but considering it's a remix, I'll demonstrate another track that particularly caught my attention. So, a decent casual story, good animation, banger music, what's not to love? Well, surprisingly quite a bit. I'll try to refrain from spoilers, but give you an idea of whether you should actually avoid this series or not. As a British citizen, it was absolutely criminal Yumiko didn't go to Mecca Bingo to gamble, or bet on rigged horse races where the organiser was cheating. Joking aside, I think that's a pretty adequate segue into one of my main criticisms. The show is very formulaic. The stakes continue to get higher, but there are only a few gambles that genuinely had me wondering who the victor would actually turn out to be. You'll have cool moments of a character explaining how they won, but once you watch a couple of episodes, you'll likely notice the formula. The show was still entertaining to me personally, but I do know that this could annoy people other than myself, and it's why I personally prefer its side story. The characters as well do suffer somewhat from being in such a short series, with only a few of them getting actual, adequate development, and also due to Yumiko being kind of the driving force of the plot. It feels like they're all swept along by her actions and not actually acting individually, which leads to some just kind of left by the wayside for half of the story before appearing at random intervals. The stakes also get so high at some moments that the outcome is kind of obvious. However, I don't find these to be gleaning issues, and they certainly don't ruin the show for me. It's still a very enjoyable watch, and its presentation is usually a treat. Whilst it's certainly no groundbreaking anime that will change my view of the medium, or restore my faith in artistic integrity, it's still going to define a new anime audience, and it won't be a surprise if you talk to anime fans a couple of years who've stayed around after first watching Kakegurui. It's spawned ideas of trend watchers, and is certainly part of the driving force that's slowly pushing anime into a mainstream perspective, so if you like me, and holding out on this show, I recommend you to watch it, but I definitely understand if you don't drop everything to do so immediately. It was on my plan to watch for a stupidly long time too. In a time where I was watching masterpiece after masterpiece, I needed a little break from critically analysing everything I saw, and Kakegurui made me remember why I started watching anime in the first place. You're going to have a decent and fun time if you can overlook its flaws, and just casually enjoy the hijinks, and that's why I think you should consider watching Kakegurui. This video was pretty much shorter than my last one, and definitely on a more popular anime. I had an absolute blast with the show and this video, and the reason it took so long is because I've been completely addicted to Tsukihime and Dark Souls, so I apologise for the wait. If you like this and you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.
Пацанам посчитать потери, суммы нули.